Um, so today we're doing the story of water into wine. It's traditional at this time of the year in Epiphany to look at this story. It's the beginning of John's Gospel. And I want to just tell you, I believe that if you understand this story fully, you'll understand the whole New Testament, the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. This is the setup story. And so I want to take you into this today because some of us have read the Bible for years. Some of us have never opened the Bible or are just starting to open the Bible. Understand this, and it'll make it easier for you as we go. On the screen is what's known as the Medaba map. It was found about 10 years ago, actually. It's in Jordan, and it's on the floor of St. George's Orthodox Church in a place called Medaba in Jordan. It's orientated south-north that way. You can see, sorry, I have to just turn. You can see up in where the arrow is the Jordan River winding away. Down here is Jerusalem, the Dead Sea over there, north Galilee, south Egypt, etc. If you were a pilgrim in the 6th century, you'd come to St. George's, and it's set perfectly north-south, and you'd set your compass bearing on that, and you could go and visit all these places. But where the arrow is pointing is a very special place. And you'll notice that if you zoom up to it there, it's got marked 2 fish. And the one fish is swimming this way, and the other fish is swimming the other way, okay? But of course, there's nothing, it's the Dead Sea, and it's called the Dead Sea for a reason. Nothing lives in the Dead Sea, so you don't get fish swimming out of the Dead Sea, so it's symbolic. And the reason it's symbolic is that this was a place where Christians historically gathered. But not just Christians, everyone began to gather in this place. And the fish symbol is always associated with early Christianity. And that's because in AD 29, a very hairy man decided to go out into the wilderness, a place called Bethany, beyond the Jordan. His name was John the Baptist, Jesus' cousin. And he started to preach a completely new message. He was a wild man. He ate locusts, we're told, and honey, and wore like a coat made of camel's hair and everything. And he was quoting from the prophet Isaiah. And Isaiah says, "I will send my messenger ahead of you who will prepare your way. A voice of one calling in the wilderness, prepare the way for the Lord, make straight paths for him." And he said to all the people coming out, and there were loads of different people. There were Jews, there were Syrians, there were Gentiles, there were even Roman soldiers. He was a bit of a novelty at the time, a bit of a celebrity. And they were all going out from the traditional places of religion out to this place, Bethany beyond the Jordan, so that they could meet this hairy man. And he said, "I want to tell you that there's a Messiah coming." Now, Messiah is a very religious word. Some of you might not know exactly what Messiah means in Mishayak in Hebrew means anointed one. Because in the ancient world, if you wanted to coronate a king or a priest, you'd pour oil over their head. And the oil would spill down. That's meant to be anointed, you see. And so all the kings are anointed that way in the Old Testament. But John the Baptist is talking about the Messiah foretold in Isaiah's Gospel 750 years or so before. And he's coming. And this guy is so amazing, people, that I'm not even worthy to stoop down and untie his sandal. Everyone's like, "Whoa, that must be really amazing." And they're all coming out. This is a really famous painting. And they're all coming out to meet John the Baptist at the Jordan River in this place called Bethany beyond the Jordan, you see. And and he lays into the religious leaders who come, the scribes and the Pharisees. He's like, "You guys, you really need to meet this guy, this Messiah guy. He's coming, he's coming." And then they say to him, "Well, how do we get ready for his arrival? How do we come? What must we do?" And they're all kind of feeling a bit low and depressed because it's Roman occupation, okay? They really need a king and a Messiah, particularly a warrior king, someone like King David. He could come with swords and an army and take down the Romans, and then life would be a little bit better. So how do we get ready? Do we form an army? Do we take up our swords and we will follow this Messiah into battle? And John says, no. Leave your swords at home, guys. I want you to come and wash yourself in the Jordan. Now, John, it's translated the word baptize. Baptize in Greek just means to dip or to plunge, okay? I want you to come and dunk yourself in the Jordan. And particularly the Jews or the religious leaders of the time were thinking, well, that's pretty strange. Like, why do we need to dunk ourselves in the Jordan? We're already Jews. We're already religious. You know, what's so, important about making yourself clean? And to understand the context of this a little bit, so much of Jewish religious life at the time in those days was about ceremonial cleanliness. And this is not about hygiene. My wife says that when I make a sandwich in the kitchen, I need to go and wash my hands and sing happy birthday. And I get some of that way sometimes. And sometimes I'm really hungry and I just want the sandwich. Now, in the ancient world, this is about death, disease, and decay, and your contact with non-Jews. So if you were well off, you would have a house, and the house would be filled with lots of jars with water. They're called purification jars, that you would wash yourself if you were ever contact between death, disease, and decay. And there were public baths everywhere, like the pool of Siloam, called mikvah. If you didn't have it in your house, you could go and actually wash yourself. Death, disease, and decay, and meeting with non-Jews. The problem was at the time, if you were poor, you didn't always have access to clean water, so you would have been deemed ritually unclean. If you were sick, you were ritually unclean until you got well. If you were sick your whole life, you would just get excluded permanently. If you were foreign, like me, a Gentile, a non-Jew by name, you were naturally ritually unclean. So Jews were discouraged from eating or meeting with non-Jews. And of course, if you were a tax collector or a prostitute or anything like that, you were socially defiled. You were unclean. Now, consider all the different people that Jesus met with in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. The man with leprosy, the disabled man, the woman with the problem of blood loss, the Samaritan foreign woman. All of these people would have made Jesus unclean. How do we get ready for his coming? How do we get ready for this coming Messiah? Do you see what John's preaching? John made himself really unpopular because he's preaching a complete overturning of the ceremonial washing system. Completely, you see. And then Jesus shows up. The Messiah comes. And he's completely not what anybody is expecting. We were expecting a king. This is Mary and Joseph's boy. He's that carpenter from Nazareth. And he's 30 years old. Okay? And warrior kings are like in their 20s. They're strong in their 20s. 30, that's old for the time. What's he ever achieved in his life? He doesn't even carry a sword. And even more striking, when he shows up, he says to John, I want you to baptize me. Whoa, wait a minute. This is the king. This is the promised Messiah. He doesn't need to grovel. He doesn't need to be dunked. And so there's lots of confusion. Who is Jesus? What is Jesus? Is he really the Messiah? Isn't he the Messiah? There's lots of talk and everything else. And Jesus disappears for 40 days. And then he slips back quietly into this wedding feast at a town called Cana in Galilee. And it's been recorded for us here because John thinks that this is something really special. I want you to listen to this. He says, what Jesus did here in Cana of Galilee was the first of the signs through which he revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. Before, everyone was confused, but now, what happened here, his disciples believed in him. This is the sign. Number one, identity. I don't know if you remember, some of you will remember There's a song by Lily Marlene that was sung during the war years and after the Second World War. Underneath the Lamplight by the Barrack Gate. Do you guys know that song? Some of you are nodding. My mother taught me that song when I was 5 years old. And then she used to embarrass me every single time we went to relatives or friends' house, and she'd say, "Sing the song. Sing the song." And I'm like, "Mum, no, come on, don't do that," because I couldn't actually sing that. But she was so proud of her little boy. She knew that I could sing. I couldn't sing, but she knew I could sing, you see. We see in this story that Jesus' identity is revealed through his mother Mary, and who else knows us more than our mothers? Okay? Who knows us better than our mothers? We all think our kids are wonderful. And it's fascinating here. There's no grand gesture. Jesus doesn't stop the whole wedding. Like, "Hey guys, look at my magic trick." This is such a personal, tender moment between a mother and a son. The wine runs out. "Mum, come on." He says woman. I think if I called my mum woman, she'd slap me. But in the first century, I think it was more socially acceptable. "It's not my time. Come on. Don't embarrass me, Mum. Come on." And she doesn't even answer him. She just goes straight to the servant. She's like, "Do what he says." Just complete faith. Do what he says. You know, he's interrupted and he quietly shows compassion. And this is a pattern that'll happen over and over and over in the Gospels. You can go and literally count how many times in the Gospels Jesus is interrupted. The disciples are always trying to push people away. The crowds are coming to, they're always trying to push people away. Bring the little children to me. Bring the sick, bring the person with leprosy to me. Always interrupted everywhere he goes. The blind man, bring him to me. I want him. His compassion for us means that he understands the complexity of human life and will meet us where we are at. And that's such a beautiful thing. No matter how trivial your situation or your problem, no matter how trivial, you can come and you can call on him. There's no place Jesus won't go, even in our most trivial situations. But here's a question for you. Which mother believes, my mother believed that I could sing. That took a lot of faith, by the way. But which mother believes that her son can change water into wine? Just think about it. If you can change water into wine, you have to create grapes out of nothing. It means that you have to bypass the natural aging process. And we're not just talking about a little bit of wine here. These jars are 100 liters. You've got 6 of them. That's 600 liters of very, very good wine. And there's no Danelles down the road. Yeah? If you can change water into wine, what does it say about who you are? If you can calm the wind and the waves, what does that say about who you are? When you come to believe in Jesus, you carry these two tensions together. On the one hand, you're staggered by how compassionate and kind he is. You can interrupt him. On the other hand, he takes you to places where you can't even get your head around. You've got to be ready for that. You've got to believe in miracles. So much of what Jesus did not have scientific explanations. But that's what makes him glorious. That's what gives me a warm, fuzzy feeling inside. Wow. There's the tenderness and the compassion, and then the other side, the power. The absolute power. And I'm going to use this one because I think Phil's waving at me and the other mic's died. And so we hold that together. But finally, meaning. Meaning. Nearby stood 6 stone jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding 20 to 30 gallons, 100 liters, as I said. Jesus said to his servants, "Fill the jars with water." So they filled the jars with water. to the brim. Then he told them, draw out some of the water and take it to the master of the banquet. I want you to picture the scene. At this wedding, there would have been plenty of empty wine jars for catering purposes. But Jesus intentionally chooses 6 Jewish ceremonial washing jars. Remember the old system of ritual cleanliness that John was overturning with the purification and the washing. What kind of message would that have sent? There's so much meaning here. This story is so completely saturated with meaning and sheer genius. These stone jars will not now be needed for their original purpose because the true bridegroom is with you. Jesus called himself the bridegroom. And there's a new reality of faith. And it's beautiful and it's abundant and nobody is excluded from the feast. Nobody. With 600 liters of wine, you can invite more people to the feast. Come and taste the best wine you've ever tasted. On one condition: external washing is no longer law, ritual, or religion. It simply is an outward sign of an inner transformation. One baptism. That's why we say one baptism, and it's done. You don't have to keep coming back to the river. Just do it once. As we choose to follow in the footsteps of the Messiah, ritual purity is traded for compassion and grace and divine love. For anyone, love your enemies. Oh, yeah, okay. How do we do that? And then on the night before Jesus is crucified, he points to the wine at the table and he says, "This is my blood poured out for you for the forgiveness of sins." And now we think of our whole body as a vessel. John 15, Jesus says, "I am the grapevine, you are the branches. If you want to produce much fruit, remain in me." Do you see all the symbolism that's coming out? What are the fruit of the Spirit? Love, joy, peace, patience, perseverance, self-control. If you put your trust in him, he wants to make you into the best wine. And so that's a slow process for many of us. I preach to myself. In my experience, nobody gets turned off by faith in Jesus himself. They get turned off by people who are rude, who are arrogant, who are unkind, people who hurt other people. You can say that you're a Christian till the cows come home. You can read your Bible. You can go to church. You can do all of these things. But what comes out of you is not good wine. People spot a fake really quickly. And so as I finish, every time you take communion, every time you go up to the rail and receive, you are asking Jesus, make me into a better wine. That's why you do it. Make me taste great. Some of you will know about wine here. You spot what's a bad wine or a good wine. That's what you're doing. This story is completely saturated with symbolism. You'll see it right the way through the New Testament. If you've got any questions, just shout. But understand this story. This is the Epiphany story that opens the way to the Messiah. Let us pray.